to Mr. John Brazil Stinson, portrayed by Bill Grannan. I'll turn it over to Mr. Stinson.
Hi everybody, welcome to Oak Hill Cemetery. I'm John Stinson, middle name's Brazil Stinson, not Brazil. The double Z double L is Brazil, after Elijah Brazil Stinson. And it comes from Virginia. Nobody could figure out where it came from, but there's an area down there called Brazil, and they were named after that area. I was born March of 1785, and my father, Elijah, was fought during the Revolutionary War. The last name Stinson came from Scotland, and it's actually spelled with a PH. But his father, he and his father didn't get along because his father was pro-British. He was a loyalist to the British. So he got mad at 14, he left, changed his spelling of his name to Stinson, S-T-I-N-S-O-N. So he left, and he wound up, he was born in South Carolina. A little north from there, Silas Cobb and his family lived, and this was Elijah now, had moved up and met his wife-to-be, Rachel Cobb. And the Cobb family goes all the way back to the Mayflower with Francis Cook. So as they fought in the Revolution, he was a spy during for George Washington. He came over to Vincennes and fought there. As time went on, he had come back to southern Indiana and really enjoyed it here because of all the wildlife and the areas to plant crops, and mostly the trees. He was a cooper by trade. John Stinson was a cooper by trade. They were both farmers and all that. As time went on, the family started slowly moving over, and they had stopped in Boone County, just south of Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati. Well, John decided to come on over to this area. So he came down to Ohio and landed at Evansville, and there he met Hugh McGarry, who was running a beaver trade and doing all kinds of fur trades and all back and forth between here and Red Banks, which is Red Banks, Henderson County, where the name Red Bank Road comes from. Red Bank Road was a trace that went all the way from Ohio, the Ohio River, all the way to Vincennes and over into Illinois. And that was a buffalo trace. But the interesting thing is, a lot of people don't realize the French went up and down that, the British and some of the colonials would go up and down that. It was a way to move their products, it was a way to move their military, it was a way to move everything, all their goods and everything up north. And then a lot of the other ones would get onto the Wabash River and go on even further, and then the people up in Terre Haute would come down. When the spring waters would come up, all the produce would come down river to the Ohio, so it could expand and everything went south. John Stinson was a trustee after he got here in 1805. It was all wooded. This whole area, downtown Evansville, didn't even exist. It was all trees. And just think about that, you know, of all the hardwood that was in this area, and it was just phenomenal to build furniture with. So as he was going on, he was a cooper. He would build all kinds of water vessels, boats, and wine and beer and all that, you know, products. And he would build cabins and all that. When he got here, he found an old cabin that apparently belonged to Hugh McGarry and all that. Well, Hugh had moved to a different location. He had already talked to the government about buying property in downtown. Well, the property that they gave him and they sold to him was at an odd shape, but it faces the southwest or southeast to the west, right? Everybody always wonders why Evansville is laid out in such a strange fashion. Well, that's the property he had, so they dealt with it. John Stinson, Hugh McGarry, and Robert Morgan Evans all set everything up. and that's why all our streets are faced the way they are. And it's pretty interesting because the way the sun sets, comes across, keeps everything warm, and it works better with the north wind blowing. Everything's kind of angled, and makes it kind of neat. Not only was he a trustee, or was I a trustee, I should say. Yeah, it's hard to do that. But anyhow, I fought in the War of 1812 along with my father, Elijah. He not only fought in the Revolution, he did the War of 1812. And that's kind of neat because he died in 35. And so he would have been, you know, in his 50s when he did this. And this is where I had fought with Hugh McGarry and Robert Morgan Evans, and we went all around and helped in Kentucky and all around southern Indiana on the Indians, because the British paid the Indians to cause trouble in this area. And the funny thing is, one of the stories that's told, that I knew people that had gone across the Ohio River to escape the Indians into Red Banks. Well, after I talked to the Millers and all that, and were worried about all the Indians, the Millers were Matilda Miller's parents, and they said the way we had escaped the Indians is when the winter, the Ohio was more shallow, would freeze, and we'd go across to escape the Indians. And so that's how a lot of them would do it. And so there was a fort over there on the Henderson Peninsula, is what there was. And so they'd go over there and stay for quite a while till the Indians would leave. Well, after the War of 1812, I had met Jonathan Jennings, who was the first governor of the state of Indiana, who was going political running for governor against General Thomas Posey. General Thomas Posey wanted Indiana to be a slave state. Nobody wanted it to be a slave state, so Jonathan Jennings won. Well, as the state came around in 1818, Jonathan Jennings appointed me as sheriff of Vanderburgh County in 1818. That same year, I built the first bridge across the Pigeon Creek, which has now been replaced. The last bridge built was built in 1818, and it needs a little help to it right now. So anyhow, we're working on that. And so then, along with that, then in 1821, I was appointed major of the militia in southern Indiana, the 10th Regiment. And so as time went on, I was still farming. Then I became a probate judge. And as time went on, the hardest case that I heard was when a young boy, he was a African-American boy, escaped from Kentucky. Now you got to remember, pre-Civil War, all this, the law said that I had to give him back because he was a minor. He was a young African boy. He had to go back. It was the hardest thing I had to do, was to turn him back over to the state of Kentucky. What happened to him after that, I don't know. That's what always bothered me about it. Another interesting thing, when I was sheriff in 1818, from January till August, because they had the election in August, Hugh McGarry's brother, Jess McGarry, was going to shoot a dog out of his front door in front of their house. Well, as he drew and he fired, his wife walked right in front of the door. That was the first murder case in Evansville, Indiana, Vanderburgh County. She fell, he was arrested, had a $10,000 bail placed on his head. That was what the court said. John Stinson being sheriff, Hugh McGarry, Robert Morgan Evans, and Mr. Jones, and a bunch of these other guys put together money to bail this guy out. Sheriff can't do that today. And that was kind of fascinating. Oh, and by the way, he was acquitted. He was not found guilty from it. So anyway, as time went on, I was getting still out and about, and then in 1840 I became a probate judge, as I was saying, and I did that for 6 years, and during that term, And then as time went on, in 1850, I wound up with pneumonia, and I passed away in March of 1850. My wife, Matilda, she lived till 1864. We're buried here. I was buried downtown when they decided to grow. They moved most of the bodies here. There's a few bodies that are still left down there, and Elijah Stinson is one of them. He's buried between buildings in an alleyway. They dug him up in 1936. No family members came to say yes, move him to Oak Hill. So there he lies down there. And he's got a memorial downtown through the DAR. And this past August, the Grannan family did a dedication here at Oak Hill Cemetery, along with Chris, Vanetta, doing this dedication and for the War of 1812. And we learned a whole lot about all of this. Got brand new headstones that were donated, got them all taken care of and placed, and just had a real good time with it. And I do a lot of the research around Evansville to find out about the different people and everyone that helped made Evansville. And I appreciate you guys for coming, and thank you for donating for the tree cause.
Did you bring a picture to show how much you resemble him?
I don't have one of these in my hand.
But if you saw the picture of what this gentleman looked